Good morning, everyone. It's a brand new week, isn't it? Are you ready? Are you ready? Well, we had a good weekend, good time of worship, and now it's time to start our week. And this week we are going to look at two men of the Bible who could not have been different. They are completely different. And if I said that, I wonder if you could even guess who they are. Well, one of them is Job. Job, J-O-B. And he has a whole book about him, doesn't he? And it's not pronounced Job, it's Job. And Job is just a great hero of the faith in my mind. Many of you know his story, and we're going to get into it in just a moment. The other person that we're going to contrast him with couldn't be on the complete opposite of the spectrum. You know who it is? Solomon. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to tell you why they're completely different. But let me just start with the verse for the day. And it comes from Job. Job chapter 2 at verse 10b, the second half of the verse. In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. And we'll get to what all of this is in just a moment, but the key phrase to me is, no matter what happened to Job, he did not sin. And that's something that I want to aim for. We'll never stop sinning. But as Rick Warren has used the phrase, we'll never be sinless, but we can sin less. And that's what we want to strive for. So that'll be our verse for the day. But this week is really all about meaning of life. Is that deep enough for you? What's life all about? What's important in life? Those are the type of questions. You know, we all think about these things, don't we? There's not a day. Is my life meaningful? Is my life counting? Is my life being lived as God would have me to do it? So those are the types of questions we ask, but these are not new questions with you and I. These are questions that, well, Job is often thought of as the first book written in the Bible. It's certainly in the early on days. It takes place in the days of the patriarchs like Abraham. So when Job thinks about things, that was like 6,000 years ago. And it's very similar to what we think about. Well, we're going to get to that. Tomorrow we're going to really dig into Job. Wednesday we're going to really dig into the life of Solomon. And then Thursday we'll come to some conclusions on what these questions that I just raised about the meaning of life. And so that's Friday. We have a very special show again. But these first 4 days of the week, we're going to dig into these two men and learn from their lives. Now, let's just briefly go over them. This is kind of the outline, in a way, of these two men. And like I say, they could not be different. You remember Job. Now, if you haven't read this book, it'd be good to do, especially the first couple of chapters and then the ending. And then the middle is dialogue between Job and three friends who are trying to comfort him. Because you see, Job was he was a wealthy man by terms of those days. He had lots of kids, he had lots of sheep and camels, and then he lost everything. Everything. In one day, his possessions were taken from him by raiders, people that stole them, basically. His sheep, his camels, if that weren't enough, his 10 children were killed all at once in a house collapse. That alone, can you think of the devastation that would do to your heart if you lost all your children at one swoop? And if the Lord hasn't given you children, then your friends or your relatives all at once killed? Wow. And then his health was taken from him. Sores were put all over his body. Terrible. He lost his health, and even his wife turned on him. His wife turned on him too. So he really had nothing. Now let's contrast that with King Solomon. Solomon had everything. According to the Bible, he was the richest person who ever lived. And boy, there's some rich people today. But in terms of comparative dollars, and of course in the way that riches were accumulated and calculated in those days, King Solomon had everything. If that weren't enough, in 1 Kings chapter 4 at verse 29 and 30, he is given great wisdom. God made Solomon the wisest man who ever lived. So all his needs were met. He had great wisdom. He knew the Lord. Solomon wrote 3 books of our Bible. 3 of the 66 were written by King Solomon. And that is Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. So Solomon was quite the person, wasn't he? I don't think we don't know of anyone who is like him in our day. And yet, he said some of the same things that you and I say many thousands of years later. So, would you expect, when you have 2 people like this, Job, who has nothing, and Solomon, who has everything, would you expect their view of life to be different from one another? The answer is obviously yes. Of course you would. I mean, even today, we think in terms of, people from different economic levels or different ethnicities or whatever, they see life differently. Nah, not necessarily. Not at all. It's where you stand with the Lord. And that's what I'm enjoying about this week. I'll just give you a sneak preview that both Job and Solomon come to basically the same conclusion about life. And I think it's a conclusion that you and I both need. And it should be our conclusion, I would contend to you. That life is only about one thing. And it's basically, we're going to get in a little more detail, but it's basically about our relationship with the Lord. That's what's important. And I think it's fascinating, and I hope you will too, I hope you can stay with us these 4 days, that it's fascinating to me that these 2 men of the Bible come to basically the same conclusion. But I'll leave you this today with our verse again, Job 2:10. In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. That's my goal for today, and I pray it is yours. Let's just walk closely with the Lord, and then let's meet back here again tomorrow as we really find out much, much more about Job tomorrow. God bless. See you then. Have a great day walking with the Lord, won't you?
Beautiful day. It's wonderful. This is the day that the